Welcome to Best of Reddit. Be sure to subscribe as we upload new content daily. First, a little backstory. I'm a 24-year-old male with OCD who's somewhere in the middle of the autistic spectrum, so I had to deal with my fair share of crap and bad luck while I was a kid. I also can't read body language and can be extremely socially awkward, so needless to say, I didn't have much luck with women once I was old enough to want to start dating. I was only ever in one relationship while I was in college, and it ended so badly that I swore off dating completely for several years. However, once I got out of school and moved away from my home state to start at a new job, I decided to try my luck again. I didn't have any real expectations of success, but you never know, right? So I made an account on an online dating site and, what do you know, I started talking to a sweet young woman who lived less than a mile away from my apartment. Let's call her Jessica. We went on a date, and to my surprise it went really well. Soon we began regularly dating, and I began to have very strong feelings for her. I even thought she might be the one. Maybe I was right. My revenge was not directed against her. I know there are a lot of stories about people getting back at cheating, manipulative exes, but this isn't one of them. No, my revenge story is about my twin sister Julie. Of the two of us, Julie was used to being the normal one, and early on in my life she appointed herself as her brother's keeper. She looked out for me when we were kids and even protected me from bullies, but as we grew older and I became more independent, I didn't need her hovering over me as much as I once did. I was always grateful for everything she did for me, but I began to resent the fact that she kept treating me like I was perpetually 5 years old. Things got even worse once Julie was in college. For reasons she still refuses to share with anyone, she had a nervous breakdown, nearly flunked out, and graduated with AC average. She soon got a job in Texas that paid barely more than minimum wage, working under a boss she hated. I, on the other hand, excelled in school, graduated summa cum laude, and landed a cushy job with the federal government. I never tried to rub this in her face or make her feel bad about herself. More than anyone, I could sympathize with some of the issues she was having to deal with, but Julie began to act as though my accomplishments were an affront to the natural order of the things. Growing up, I had always been the one who struggled, and she had been the one who succeeded. It had been that way for more than 20 years, but now things were different and she couldn't stand it. I never saw us as being in competition with each other, but she did, and my dear sister always hated to lose. However, there was one competition where Julie had me beat, and that was in romance. She met and married her husband several years ago, and although I was happy for both of them, she began to rub it in my face when I returned home on vacation to visit my parents and relatives. Her jibes about my perpetual singularity really hurt, and when I confronted her and asked her to stop, she laughed and brushed me off. She became really passive-aggressive and spiteful when she thought she could get away with it, so it wasn't long before we fell out of touch. That was my mistake. Maybe if I'd tried to communicate with her more often, I'd have realized just how much her jealousy and spite had poisoned her. This continued until I met my girlfriend, and by the time I invited her to visit my family for the holidays, I was convinced that Jessica and I really had something good going. I was so excited for her to meet my parents and grandmother that I could barely sit still on the flight home. When we landed and got to the house, everyone received her warmly. I was certain this was going to be the best Christmas of my life. Julie was determined to make it the worst. Like I said earlier, I think she saw love as just another competition, one that she could smugly say she'd beaten me at until now. So to her, Jessica was a threat to what was left of our old sibling hierarchy, which meant she had to go. At first, my Christmas vacation seemed like a dream come true. Everyone loved Jessica and the two of us were having a fantastic time. We threw snowballs, went Christmas shopping, the whole 9 yards. Even Julie seemed to be acting nicer toward me. I felt like I was on top of the world. But then it all came crashing down. See, I have a personal laptop that I play games and stuff on, and Jessica was into that kind of thing as well, so of course I brought my laptop with me on the trip. I got some new games as a Christmas gift from my grandmother, so the day after Christmas, Jessica and I stayed up late playing together. Eventually she got tired and went to bed, but I wanted to stay up and play a little more. That was a mistake, because when I finally crashed at 2 a.m. in the morning, I was so tired that I forgot to shut my computer off. Jessica was still sleeping when I woke up, so I went downstairs to have a late breakfast. Julie was already at the table, but she didn't say much until my girlfriend got out of bed about an hour later. Once she'd eaten, Jessica asked if she could use my laptop to play for a bit, and of course I said yes. My laptop was sitting on a folding card table in the living, so I heard her go and sit down. But almost as soon as she did, Jessica yelled a string of expletives and stood up so fast that she nearly knocked the chair over. I asked her what was wrong, but she said nothing. Instead, she marched over to me, lifted her hand, and slapped me across the face. Tears were running down her cheeks. I was so shocked that I couldn't say anything, and while I was trying to wrap my head around the situation, Jessica began packing her things. I tried asking her, begging her to tell me what was wrong, but she refused to say anything. So I went over to my laptop to investigate, and when I did, I saw that all the tabs on my internet browser had been replaced with porn and adult dating sites. I felt the bottom drop out of my stomach and thought I was going to be sick. I grew up in a very puritanical household, and Jessica and I had both agreed to be abstinent until and if we got married, so there's no way I would betray her by looking at stuff like that. But judging from what was on the screen, you'd think I was a secret porn addict. That's when I realized that Julie must have snuck onto my laptop after I'd gone to bed and done this. I even thought I saw a smug grin tugging at one corner of her mouth, but she quashed it when she realized I was looking. I was absolutely devastated and desperate to explain the situation, but Jessica wouldn't hear any of it. She dumped me right then and there, bought a ticket on the next flight out of town, and went to stay in a hotel. I tried calling and texting her, but she quickly blocked me. My relationship was ruined, and if my parents and grandma had seen what Julie had done, I might have lost them too. Thankfully, my parents had left in a hurry that morning to run some errands in town, and my grandmother was still asleep. I knew what Julie had done, and she knew that I knew. Both of us also knew that I'd never be able to prove it. I felt heartbroken, destroyed, and utterly betrayed. And as I stood in the smoldering ashes of my romance with Jessica, I promised myself that I would make my sister suffer for what she'd done. But Julie was no fool. She'd be expecting retaliation. So, as difficult as it was, I made myself do nothing. I acted as though I were utterly defeated. I played the part of a broken, miserable young man in the throes of heartache, and all the while, I bided my time. I began to study Julie when she wasn't looking, found excuses to be close by when she was logging on to her computer and cell phone. My vacation was almost over at that point, so I wasn't able to learn more than 1 or 2 letters of her password and passcode, but it was a start. I knew that in time, Julie would let her guard down. When she did, I would be ready. For the next year and a half, every time I went home to visit my family, I dedicated myself to learning a few more parts of her computer and cell phone password and passcode. Julie never seemed to change either of them, and I made sure not to breathe so much as a word to anyone of what happened with Jessica. Step by step I pieced her login information together, one letter or number at a time, until finally, only a day before flying back from my most recent visit home, I had everything I needed. I'd had a lot of time since Jessica left me to think about what I was going to do to Julie once I'd gotten into her phone and computer, and I didn't waste any time. That same night, when everyone else was asleep, I put on a pair of gloves, crept into Julie's room and snagged her phone from her bedside table. Then I snuck downstairs, sat down at her laptop, and logged into both. I'll never be able to describe the dark joy I felt as I saw her whole life laid bare at my fingertips. A few experimental searches on her laptop confirmed what I'd long suspected. Julie kept all her passwords cached so she didn't have to remember them. She'd always had trouble remembering things like that, especially after her nervous breakdown, so she relied on the computer to remember everything for her. Her Amazon account, her computer games, her email, you name it. She'd click the "Remember Password" option for each and every one of them. I happily set myself to the task of destroying it all. I went full scorched earth, burning everything on her phone and laptop to cinders and salting the digital soil in my wake. Her iTunes account. Gone. Her Amazon account, with its expansive Kindle books collection. Gone. Her Steam and Origin accounts, with their libraries of all Julie's computer games. Gone. Then I turned to her social media. Julie was big into Tumblr and didn't have many friends in real life, so I sent a bunch of vile messages to all her online friends and posted a bunch of hateful, racist garbage on her page, thereby ensuring that she'd be permanently shunned by everyone in her digital social life. I then spent a few minutes deleting everything she'd ever written in Microsoft Word, including all the crappy short stories and fanfiction she'd written, cleared the recycle bin to ensure nothing could be recovered, and used her work email to send a vicious letter to Julie's boss, telling her exactly what Julie thought of her in the most colorful terms I could think of. I made sure to cover my tracks and erase all traces of having sent it, then blocked the boss's email and her number from Julie's phone. When she returned to work, she'd be in for a nasty surprise. Finally, I changed the passcode she used to unlock her phone and laptop, just to rub salt in her wounds. By the time she was able to create new ones, it would be far, far too late. The only thing I didn't screw with was her bank account, not that there was a whole lot in it. I took a moment to survey my work, nodded, then crept back upstairs. Once I'd put Julie's phone back where I'd found it, I crawled into bed and slept like a baby. My flight left early the next morning, and although I wasn't there to personally witness the fallout, I heard about it later and it was glorious. Julie took her phone and laptop into Best Buy and the Apple Store to be looked at, and nearly had another nervous breakdown when she was finally able to log in and saw what I had done. Julie's boss fired her as soon as she returned to work, and from what I hear, she went out of her way to personally make sure my sister couldn't find work again. Her Tumblr friends all blocked her and wrote to all their friends about what a terrible person she was, and when she logged back in, she discovered that she was now a complete pariah on the site. She was soon forced to move in with her husband, whom she's now completely dependent on. She's now an unemployed stay-at-home wife as a result of what I did to her, and that's been an absolutely crushing blow to her pride and whatever was left of her self-esteem. To someone who always prided herself on being a strong and independent woman, it's almost a fate worse than death. She called me up a few days after I left and screamed at me, but I said nothing and blocked her. She knows it was me, but I covered my tracks too well, and she can't even tell our parents or make a big stink about it because that would mean revealing to the whole family just what an awful person she really is. I feel absolutely no remorse, and I sleep soundly at night knowing that I made her pay for what she did to me and Jessica. If anything, I still don't think she's suffered enough, and whenever I have another opportunity to make her suffer, I'm going to take it. She will weep a river of tears before I'm through with her, and I will drink it dry. Oh, and after she lost her job, Julie also got fat.